Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Happy June of 2021. Thank you for joining episode 53. It's a 5, it's a 3. It's been going on for, I don't know, what is it now, 14, 15 months, Jason? And we're not slowing.
15 months of podcasting, and our audience just keeps getting bigger. So thank you for everyone who continues to tune in for us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for joining us. It's kind of amazing, Jason, that we're already in the month of June. Before I kind of tee up, because we have something special planned, actually for the entire month, but specifically the next 3 weeks. And I'll give everyone a clue. If you didn't see any of the social sort of promos for this, Jason is actually wearing a T-shirt that describes what we're going to be going. Jason, tell us a little bit about that shirt.
I got to tell you, I have been saying this on public stages and webcasts for like 7 years. Why BaaS when you can DRaaS? Meaning, why just put your data up in a cloud if the only thing you're going to do is just suck it back down again? Just power it back up, right? There's so much more you can do with cloud-based data protection. And as a very shameless plug, if you find something on Twitter that you like that I said, and you make a T-shirt of it and even give me attribution for that, and then mail me an extra large, you might too find it on one of our podcasts. So I got to give a big thanks out to Global Data Vault for liking this. It's just some fantastic humans over there. I actually have some of my data being protected on one of their servers just for fun. But yeah, so they made me a T-shirt. And so here we are. We're talking about BaaS and DRaaS this week.
Outstanding. And I'll follow suit if Wolfgang Van Halen or Matt Bruck that run EVH Enterprises also happen to be watching and want to send a guitar. We will probably even play it on the podcast for you. We won't break it. No Pete Townsend or Paul Stanley going on here. So let's dive into our topic. You've teed it up, but let's put a finer point on it. If we go to our first graphic, just a real quick notion of the agenda we've got planned in the next 3 weeks. You can see here today, the next Monday after that, it's all around backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service. Jason, this comes hot on the heels of yet more private research that we've done. Private meaning Veeam conducted this research, but blind in the sense that no one knew that it was Veeam software sponsoring that research.
Yeah, we talk about the fact that for the last 15 months that we have been doing these podcasts. The other thing that we've been doing for these last 15 months, since we couldn't get on an airplane, is we've been doing a lot more independent, unbiased research to really make sure that we are staying ahead of the curve for where is the data protection and, in fact, broader IT market going. And so if you're familiar with some of the stuff that we've done in the past, our marquee report, 3,000 responses, the data protection trends report, kind of looked at a lot of different macro trends. And one of those trends was around the interest in cloud-based data protection, which we all lovingly call BaaS and DRaaS. And so we wanted to double click on that this year. So earlier we asked 1,000 IT decision makers in the US, 4 different countries in Europe, and Australia, New Zealand. What does BaaS mean? What are their drivers for it? How do they pick their service provider? So that's what we're going to be covering over this 3-week period, is some of the highlights of that. And then we promise to get a full research report out later this summer, just to keep the conversation going.
Outstanding. And you mentioned different locales, number of people, number of countries. Let's hit our global map to see where people are tuning in from. Australia, I mean, your eyes just jumped there, right? Anytime something big and green pops up. But we've also got Germany, Australia, as we mentioned, Palestine, the UK, as we can see over here. But a special shout out to a fairly unique geography that we don't get every single time, which is Senegal. So thank you very much for joining. We've got multiple locations there we go, there's Senegal. See, this is a good way to learn the global map as well. And also shout out for those in the United States. We've got Colorado, Texas, Georgia as well joined. So super thanks for that. We'll check back in on that. Throw a comment in wherever you may be tuning in from. And of course, if you have any questions, we do have a team that's moderating that on LinkedIn, and we'll feed that to us onto our side production feed. So, Jason, let's do a quick recap. You mentioned some of the other global research that we've done. Let's just bring kind of everyone up to speed if they haven't seen some of our series that we've done in the past around hybrid cloud realities.
Yeah, so let's look at this first one. So this first one is one that Dave and I have talked about a lot for the first half of the year. This just shows production servers and where do they live. And you see on the left-hand side physical servers, you see in the middle virtual servers, you see on the right-hand side cloud-hosted production servers. And what you see is basically an amalgamated 4-year curve from 2020 reality or actual, pre-COVID, by the way, all the way through 2023 anticipated. And what you basically see is an anticipation of a dilution, meaning that as organizations do cloud first as a strategy, you're going to see a gradual decline in the percentage of servers that are physical, relatively flat on percentage of servers that are virtual in the middle. And then, of course, that net sum gain is all around cloud-hosted production servers on that right-hand side, with the anticipation that by 2023, over half of production servers will be cloud hosted. And as I am often to point out, whenever you modernize production, you have to modernize protection. So as you're modernizing to a cloud hosted production scenario, we ought to be thinking about what does that mean for protection of those workloads as well. So that kind of gets us along the way. Let's go to the next one though. Same 4-year curve. Same starting pre-COVID all the way up through an anticipation of 2023. In this case, we're talking about protection instead of production. And in protection, what you see is on the left-hand side, the percentage of organizations whose their primary backup solution is going to be self-managed and all on-prem. So this is basic disk, dedupe disk, tape, if you take it out of the drive and stick it on a shelf, all of those on-prem self-managed. Veeam loves those people. However, that population is going down, right? So from 40% in 2020, anticipate down to 19% by 2023. Meanwhile, self-managed backup using cloud services. So that's going to be when you add, say, a cloud object storage tier like cloud tier to an existing Veeam backup solution that's on-prem, gradual increases along the way. But the reason we're doing this study is because take a look at that right side, Dave. Cloud-based backup managed by a backup service provider goes from 29% in 2020, anticipated to nearly double, 46%, nearly half of organizations saying they're going to be using cloud-based backup as a primary method of data protection by 2023. That's really disruptive news.
Yeah, I really think so, and maybe remedial, but sometimes when you first see these series of bars, it can look a little intimidating. So I think of them as sort of a series of two things. And the two things are, 2020, 2 years later, then the following year, 2021, and 2 years after that. And what we see is that people are getting aggressively meeting their year-on-year, 1-year goal, meaning trying to move in a certain direction. But in some cases, you can see as you get towards the right-hand side of the diagram, to your point, Jason, the acceleration or the amount of change arguably heavily influenced by COVID and the pandemic and work from home and other kinds of resources, financial models wanting to be explored in a different way. This is causing significant change, but I always like to put the brakes on and say, doesn't mean we're unplugging the data center. Doesn't mean there are zero physical machines in the data center. To your point, Jason, doesn't mean physical tape has gone away. For most of us of reasonable size and of past asset investment, it is going to be an and. Doesn't mean the and doesn't overweight. You hear to the 80-20 rule. Maybe we flip 80-20 the other way, but 20 is still a big percent. 20 is still important in the data.
Absolutely. And I think it also, you want to look at not only the geos, but also the size of the organization. So we just finished also some research specifically around small to mid-sized businesses. And if you're a small to mid-sized business, 200 employees or less, your job is not IT, right? Your job is whatever it is, the service or product that you're doing. And so, yeah, it's very common that organizations, especially smaller ones, they're outsourcing every part of IT they can get out of because they really just want to focus on what they started their business for. And yeah, they ought to be doing backup as a service, right? They ought to stop managing backups in general and just know that they're going to work, right? And then focus on their product at hand. On the other side, enterprises, a lot more at stake. It's going to have a different kind of blend to it. But yes, so there's a lot of other factors that go in.
And it's workload specific too. I mean, you could
Yes.
be a Fortune 100 corporation, and certainly your on-prem databases or your records that you need to keep long term might be different than your work from home employees, might be different from your other internal systems, et cetera. So everything is a it depends answer. I do want to acknowledge a question that came in from Chris, and I've been pausing on it until we get to the next slide. But shout out to Chris for asking the question, and I want to answer it here in just a little bit. So, Jason, now let's start to double click on what is the future of DRaaS, or disaster recovery as a service.
Yeah, so we're going to say why BaaS when you can DRaaS. Let's finish that story out, right? So we looked at BaaS, and certainly the idea of having cloud being part of your data protection strategy is almost inevitable for most organizations. You're going to get your data out of the building. That's awesome. But then the question becomes, what else can you do with it? And this is really interesting to me. So I've been in data protection for 31 years. I was a DR planner for about 9 of those years, on and off. Take a look at what this is showing. And somehow the coloring got a little screwed up, so I'm sorry about that. What you're looking on the bottom is the percentage of organizations that are using self-managed data centers for their DR. So the West Coast replicates to the East Coast replicates to the West, and that stays pretty consistent. About a third of organizations doing that. But take a look at what you're seeing in the bright green, where DR as a service going to a cloud provider starts at 23% of organizations in 2020, anticipated to more than double by 2023. This is really exciting to me. And I think 2 things kind of come into the fray for this. One, certainly the tools continue to mature, right? So as those capabilities become easier and easier, also I think we're seeing, especially because of COVID, so many organizations now understand their high dependency on IT services and data. How do we solve for that, right? And when we put those 2 things together and say, hey, why would I run secondary infrastructure if I'm a small to mid-size or even a commercial organization? Throw it to a cloud. It's elastic. I got smarter humans there, and BCDR always requires smarter humans and dedicated expertise, right? And so those DRaaS providers provide that. So huge opportunity there to just do better by leveraging the cloud for what it's smart for.
Yeah, and here's a good spot, in my opinion, to answer Chris's question. Again, super thanks for the question. But Chris asked, will we see a Veeam end-to-end DRaaS offering, meaning not requiring a service provider? So, Chris, never say never, because Veeam is the company that a decade ago said we won't do agents, or we're not interested in physical, but the market really pulled us in that direction. However, being partner-led and partner fulfilled as basically an entire premise of our company, at this point, we don't anticipate coloing our own capabilities or front-ending AWS end-to-end. The reason why is we have 27,000 active Veeam cloud and service providers globally. In some cases, they're very good about handling specific regions. In other cases, they're very good about handling specific verticals. And the example I like to use is in the East Coast of the United States, there's one partner that has made a cottage industry out of focusing on dental offices. And my dad, retired dentist, or medical in general, there are certain unique characteristics that one needs to take into account. And you could obviously take this to other verticals, legal, healthcare, et cetera. So we feel like the partner ecosystem is adding extended value because of their expertise or maybe being local to you, et cetera. If later on we evaluate that maybe there's something that we can do ourselves, we'll certainly entertain that. But right now we intend to be partner first. So I know, Jason, we've got a lot of activity. You make final comment and let's hit the map after that.
Yeah, so and I would just kind of preface with, Dave and I both are part of the Office of CTO, work for Danny Allen, our SVP, and every time somebody asks me about a turnkey DRaaS offering, because it comes up, it's a logical conversation, I tell them I hope Veeam doesn't do that kind of offering. And the reason is because to really be successful with business continuity disaster recovery isn't so much about the tech. It isn't about where the data is going to land. It really is around the business process and the contextual understanding of what each customer needs. And frankly, I just think that's so much better done at a more local or regional level where you can have dedicated service expertise to say, let me understand your business. Let me understand your processes. Let me understand your IT dependencies. Build a plan for you. The data needs to be far enough away to be disaster recovery, but close enough to you from a relationship perspective that When you have a problem, they can call. There's just so much to BCDR that really requires that local contextual acumen. Doing that at scale, I think, does a disservice to that. Could we maybe do more to do more best practices and continue to improve our orchestration workflows? Absolutely. We've got plans for that. But local fulfillment of BCDR, I think, is one of the things that actually radically increases your survivability of the data itself. So I kind of hope we don't.
There we go. So I think we've got at least a dozen additional countries and some states since we last looked at the map. Ooh, and indeed we have. So if we go around the horn, let's start taking a look. If we double click a little bit on this, we've got in the United States, in addition to what we've spoken in the past, Florida, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio. You can obviously see Mexico has been covered. And let's see, if you go to South America, nope, blow that off. We're going to India, Pakistan, Taiwan.
Nice.
We can see also Turkey, the Czech Republic, Belgium, Romania. I would be remiss if I didn't hit some of the South American countries like Brazil, Chile, Argentina. Jason, I got to pause here because I know you want to say something about some of the food in some of those South American countries.
I love LATAM. Like almost the entire continent is green, and between the food and the wine, why wouldn't you? Absolutely. So thank you to my friends down south.
And super shout out over in Africa, Mozambique, Nigeria, South Africa. In addition to, we already had Senegal in the house. So super thanks for that. Jason, I think, in my opinion, we have 3 more slides we want to touch upon, but these next 2, you could call them the money slide, meaning when I put out the little toast or promo out there about what we're going to talk about, what is BaaS? And that's not according to you or me. That's according to what the global respondents, as you can see, over 1,000. What does that mean to the average person in multiple geographies out there? This is the first of 2 key money slides, and then we'll get to last wrap up.
Yeah, I do hope that let's go ahead and make this one full screen. And for the kids at home, take a screenshot of this, because I think this is one of the most interesting slides that we've run data on in a while. So this was actually the very first question on the survey. So no extra context, no definitions. What does it mean to you? Everybody on the other surveys were saying, I want BaaS, right? Great, let's talk about that. So what you're seeing here in the dark green is when you can choose more than one option. What does BaaS mean to you? And when you have to choose what's the most important aspect, that's the brighter green and the smaller lines. And I think there's some really interesting stacking that comes out of this. Certainly the top one runs from the cloud without on-site hardware. I got to tell you, when I looked at that, originally I thought to myself, maybe we asked the question, there's actually 2 parts to this question or this answer. There's the, does it run from the cloud? And then there's the without on-site hardware. And I believe that what's really the problem here is that some organizations are saying, look, I'm tired of day 0. I'm tired of, I want to pick my own metal, and then I want to right size it to the software, and then have somebody run setup.exe for me, and that kind of appliance. And if you just want a faster time to value, for some folks, that's an appliance, right? Yep. For other folks, I just want to be able to put in a credit card, light it up, and go from there. Now, whether or not your cloud-based data protection solution is pure cloud, or actually my preference is that once you subscribe to a cloud provider, they drop a local appliance onto your property, because that's going to give you those local SLAs, those really agile recovery scenarios, and oh, by the way, then survive that data back to the cloud. So that is my preference on how you do that. And then beyond that, what else we got? So number 2, managed by third party, right? So again, I don't want to babysit my backups. The number 1 data slide that we saw in data protection trends, I want better reliability. I just want it to work, right? And I think that's what you're seeing here is they want it managed by smarter humans to make sure it just works. And then there's the rest of the list, right? So web-based UI, yes, we want something more modern. I was actually pleased to see, and actually this goes back to Chris's question from earlier, delivered by the actual software provider actually was the second to the bottom as far as most common respondents.
Yeah.
And I think that really validates our strategy. It's 1 in 9 folks say, yeah, they'd like that to be there. I'd rather just put a VCSP logo on it.
Yeah, and a couple double clicks on that, Jason. What's interesting to me is if you look at the most important, There's only 4 in double digits, and it's actually 60. I love my Hewlett-Packard calculator. 67%. So literally 2/3 say that there are 4 defining most important characteristics around BaaS, and obviously those are at the top. But if you look at check all that apply, you get, in my opinion, a more even distribution, meaning there's a few things that I would like out of this capability. A little surprising to me, I have to admit, or fall on the sword, that second to the bottom is the OpEx model, wanting to change the finances of things. Because for many of us, finances in its various forms, whether it's ROI, TCO, reducing software expense, reducing hardware expense, especially, changing the capital and OpEx models are very, very important, especially as we try to transition more fully out of the pandemic. And then, interestingly enough, Jason, at the very bottom as an alternative to tape for long-term retention. And the reason I say interesting is that there's kind of been talk for some time that, well, one of the easy ways to kind of flex cloud into your backup environment is to use that as a target for your otherwise on-prem activity. And I agree that that is an interesting use case, but perhaps that's really a statement of maturity that those that were seeking to do that have already kind of onboarded down that path.
I think that's exactly what you're saying, Dave. It'd be like asking, hey, what do you want in a phone provider? And one of the answers being, every time I pick up the handset, I hear a dial tone, right? I think that we're just so far past that from a maturity curve. The presumption of I want it to be OpEx instead of purchase software. Why I want OpEx on everything, right? Yeah. There's no part of IT that I still want to do hardware investments on if I have to. I want to do it as a pay as I go. And then similarly, if the only thing you think that BaaS is get your data out of the building, there's a lot of ways to get your data out of the building. And in fact, frankly, one of the things that I think is one of the most interesting differentiators among cloud-based backup solutions is when they deliver tape as a service. Right? Because tape absolutely still has a place in 2021 IT, and being able to have that pure chain of custody, wholly air-gapped, irrefutable, litigatable iteration of data, I think is money. So I love the fact, I think they got that right. Yes, dial tone should be there, but that's not what we're looking for.
Yep. Let's hit this next slide because this is actually a different view of the same exact slide. Now, this can look busy. It's actually not. If you just parse across the top, you're going to see multiple categories of employee sizes. Because one of the theses that has been out in the industry is, Jason, that, BaaS is just for the little guys. That's for like the Jason and Dave Corporation, not for like a 500 or a 1,000 or, pick your larger number, right? But it's just for little people or for organizations just starting out. So right off the bat, you can see that is not necessarily the case. So let's call that myth bust number 1. Yep. Before I turn it over to you, let me hit sort of, I don't know if it's myth bust number 2, but there's a fair amount of consistency about what people are looking for, regardless if you're like of the Jason and Dave and Friends size, or if you are literally a publicly traded company. And don't by any stretch confuse this list of the 5 most important things is, whatever's at the bottom of the screen is just not that important. Now, this was selecting from a list of about 20, approaching 24 different possibilities. So rather think of this list as this is the upper quartile of what we really think is important, what we really think backup as a service means, and then go across the spectrum there by employee size.
Yeah, you said it perfectly, right? So certainly there are some folks out there that think that BaaS is somehow is synonymous with SMB, and it's just not, right? So one of the things we wanted to do in the survey was we asked equal portions of organizations across all sizes of orgs, the whole list of questions. And Dave, you're exactly spot on. So we took the top ones because it's like, well, maybe what matters most to an enterprise is different than what matters most to a small business. And so this is just a cut. It's the same graph actually from the last slide. We just took the top 5 off the top, resorted them, and then the colors I think just make it easy. And again, so basically there's kind of 2 bands that are pretty consistent across orgs of all sizes. One, that cloud hosted, and again, I'm going to put an asterisk on the with on-site hardware just because I think we're talking about time to value and maintenance, as opposed to necessarily cannot have a blinking light black box on-prem. Right, because I just don't think that's entirely the story. But then remotely managed, right? Having those smarter humans, that is that consistent top band. And then the second band is survivability of data and a modern UI. And then everything after that starts to get a little dicey and fuzzy overall. But I love this view. And again, remember, this is Australia, New Zealand, France, Germany, UK, the Nordics, and the United States. This was a gamut across the board. But what it tells us is this is where the puck is moving. And I think this is super interesting, especially how consistent it was.
Yeah. And let's hit this last slide just briefly before we wrap up and tease up the next upcoming. If you go to the next slide, what we're going to see is about what's the view on the current backup as a service and disaster recovery as a service provider. And it's not so dissimilar, in my opinion, Jason. It's actually people are looking for the same kinds of things.
Yeah, so, and this is actually going to be the basis of what we talk about for the next 2 weeks as kind of our tee up moving off of this. So looking at both BaaS and DRaaS, one of the things I think is super interesting is, again, comes down to remote monitoring. It comes down to being a curator of the services and servers themselves. I'm equally surprised and pleased of the ad hoc stuff all falls to the bottom. Invokes data restores, drops the agents, right? So I think this is a really interesting landscape for us to look at. We're going to look more specifically at why customers are looking for these things or not next week. And then in our third week, we're going to look at these are just the services that are offered, whether the respondents are using them or not. So in the third part of our series, we're going to come back and look at why did you choose the service provider that you did? And look for some drivers for that. So hopefully a lot of Cloudy folks will be tuning back in all month long.
Yeah, well said, Jason. And thank you, everyone, for your questions, for tuning in, giving a shout out on the map. As Jason just mentioned, next week we're going to take a look at why and why not BaaS. Let's look at both sides of the equation here. It's not a one size fits all. And then the week after that, meaning June 21st, we'll look at how to choose a provider if you elect to go down that path. But we also want to give a shout out this Friday, our longtime colleagues, especially in terms of live streams. Rick Vanover and Melissa Palmer this Friday at the same time are going to be doing a recap of what you might have missed at the recent Veeam event, where we had an amazing amount of attendance. That video for all sessions is still up there, but they're going to give you a 30-minute quick digest. Oh, and do want to give a shout out, just seeing from our production team, Canada and Uruguay also came in. Look at that. Jason, you get a nice big geography like Canada
nice.
There. That really colors the map nicely. Huge shout out, everyone, for tuning in. Hope to see you on the next live stream. Thank you very much. Stay safe, stay positive, and we'll see you next Monday.
Bye now.